Good morning and welcome to Unlocking Freedom in Nature and Art. We're so glad you're here and we are excited to have back Noah here. And I'm excited because Lori is still here with us too.
Yay! I'm back. I'm still here. How are you, everyone in the world? Greetings. If you're watching in another time zone or at a different time, you're watching the replay, we welcome back Noah. Thank you for coming in. And we knew that you needed to come back because we left a lot of stuff hanging. And Noah is an attorney. He does martial arts. He's writing a book. And that's why he needed to come back. Last time, we kind of left off on his martial arts and then his story in terms of his childhood, how he grew up and how he's been able to overcome a lot of those events and circumstances he faced. And here you are. Tell us a little bit about all that.
So before Noah goes there, Lori, I just want to say welcome to everybody. I want to also say be sure to click, share, ask questions. We will try to get back to them. And if you notice us looking down or something, we're not ignoring you. We are looking to try to see your notes. Sometimes Lori sees you asking questions, and sometimes it's me. It doesn't always come through, so we want you to be aware of that. But thank you so much for being here, and we're so excited to have you here, Noah, again, to finish your story because you had so much to offer last time. And
Oh,
Noah's coming
we
from
haven't
Texas
even,
like Lori, so.
well, frankly, we haven't even begun my story. And so if that's what you, are you
No,
asking me to just
yes, we
get
want you to
from the
go
beginning here?
back to the past, to the beginning of, kind of hear your story brought up so that what you're going to be basing your memoirs and stuff on in your journals, because that plays a huge role, I believe, in where we're going to be going with this. So,
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a story. Okay. And I'm going to tell you a story about stories. So, and again, this is what I'm writing about. So, this book is about how I make sense of the world. So when I was a very young child, I was taught a story. And that story is essentially that mankind, the human species, lived with God before Earth was even made, and that there was conversation and conflict before the Earth was even created, and all of us were there, and we all lived in God's presence, and that we chose to come to Earth for reasons, and that after we die, we're going to go back. And so as a very young child, this basic story is how I came to understand everything, including Christianity. So when I was a child, my parents took me to church and I learned a song as a baby. And that song is called I Am a Child of God. And the words go, and he has sent me here and has given me an earthly home with parents kind and dear. That's the story. And so this is the story I was taught. And ever since then, I've been obsessed with that story. And I've wanted to learn and know everything I could about it. And I asked questions about it. And the way that I made sense of the world was to try to put it in its place in that story. And understanding my childhood, understanding my life, actually. And yes, and so that's a better way to explain it. So the cool thing about the things that are eternal is that they're fractal. And this is how you understand symbolism, and this is how you understand scripture. And so we have this story, this broad cosmic story, and it sounds almost like a sci-fi story. And then within that story, part of that story is we are born and we live our lives and we die. And that is a story also. And so our lives are stories within a story. And within our own lives, how many stories have you lived through in your life?
Who
How many
knows?
stories will you live through? And so and the more I've thought about this, there's a scholar I'm going to shout out. His name's Martin Shaw. He's a academic and he's an expert on stories. But here's and trying to understand not just what my life is a story, but trying to understand what a story even is. What defines a story? I mean, it's got a beginning and an end, but understanding how human beings, and so I was taught all throughout my childhood that, in terms of public speaking, because I was raised in the Mormon church, and what Mormons do really well is they teach their children how to do public speaking, and they make them get up in front of people and talk. And and so public speaking is like the scariest thing ever, right? But this is something I was learned to do as a young man. As a very young child, I got up in front of people and spoke because that was what was expected to me in that culture. And I was taught public speaking as a skill, and those were classes that we learned in elementary school, middle school, is public speaking. We had to get up and talk. And the best way to, and this is something I learned over and over and over again, is that if you wanted to get someone's attention, if you wanted to get a room full of people to pay very close attention to what you're telling them, you tell them a story. And so every good public speaker will get up and they'll tell a story. Funny thing happened on the way here today. And then all of this, we can't help it. We lock in. We want to know how the story ends. This is something deeply ingrained in us. And so I want you to think about the business of storytelling: movies, books, novels. Human beings cannot get enough of stories. We spend billions and billions and billions of dollars for other people to tell us stories. That's what the whole movie industry, that's all it is. And 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 so understanding what stories get attention and what don't, we can start to understand, well, what makes a story a story. And so ultimately this led to a life of pursuit and understanding the entire plan of salvation, or the entire broader, trying to understand that story on every level
Right. So
and what it
when you
actually
were
means.
right, so when you were a teenager, did you go
Yes.
through anything that has led you other than the story, like that you said, knowing that,
Mm-hmm.
were your parents the greatest example? I,
Well, that's a good. Well, here's the thing. Yes, yes, but it wasn't. It wasn't until I learned their story, and so this is a huge part of my healing journey and my and understanding my own childhood trauma. Is it impossible without understanding my parents' story and what happened to them, and what happened because of those things. And so a huge part of understanding myself is understanding where I came from and understanding my place in the story of my parents. And so this is the so th- what and so once you start to link these stories together, then you start to get a real feel for generational trauma and how it affects you. Because often because it happens to us so early, we're blind to it. And unless someone is there to recognize it, to help us, usually it's a spouse that says, oh man, you're impossible to live with, what happened to you? you know
right.
and
Well,
then
and I was going to say a lot of times people want to help you if they
yes.
see you're being abused, but they're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
I remember just even helping because I used to work with the police department for child safety. I was in charge of it down in Springfield. And
Yeah.
we had this little girl ran up after one of our block home meetings because we bring in the cops and firefighters and stuff and, said, if you feel like you're being abused. And we kind of knew that her brothers were being abused. And she ran up to me, clung to me, and said, please don't make me go home, and found out she'd been being sexually abused from this father-in-law, and she was they were being
Oh,
beaten. They had scars up and down their arms and their backs, and
did you know
they
that at the time, or you just had a suspicion?
we had a suspicion because they were locked out of their apartment all the time and stuff. And we had a
Oh,
commons area, and parents would send their kids to us all the time, like, hey, if we're not home, go to Tammy, she's safe, you know.
oh
And this was a
wow. Oh
huge
wow, they
apartment,
trusted you.
a
That's why
huge
the child,
apartment
yeah.
complex, you know. But
Mm.
she was just, they were crying. The kid boys came and they were crying, you know, and we kept them there. You know, the cops came and, you know, took care. But it's amazing how many even people that weren't even, but just heard the story was, how dare you turn them in? And it's like you have no idea what you're talking about. When they heard the story of all the abuse that was going on, then it was like, oh, okay, because the kids wanted, you know, they ended up, long story short, back with their
Yeah.
grandparents. But there was a time, you know, it was not
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Because people, you know, they automatically assume the worst for some reason. But it was like, no, we're trying to help these kids, you know, we're not trying to take kids away. I'd
Yeah.
rather help parents, you know, learn techniques to help their kids than have their kids abused. But there was this boyfriend of this lady who was sexually, you know, and beating the kids and stuff. And I mean, and she was only like 5 years old.
So
You
I
know,
want to ask Noah, are you familiar with Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So it's just so awesome how these three stages of departure and initiation and returning and all that. You have to basically find a coach or a mentor, like in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker with Master
That's
Yoda
right.
and Harry
He
Potter.
called
And yeah,
Campbell calls it divine aid.
yes, exactly.
That's what he calls it. Yeah.
So Tammy was that for some of those kids, right? Who
Yes.
who can you say was your mentor or coach? And then when did you turn into the hero yourself?
Who was my divine aid? Or also known as the psychopomp. It's
Okay.
the wise advice, and the trope of the archetype is the wise advisor of the hero. So Gandalf is an example of that. But who is my divine aid?
So the thing is, I don't know, you haven't told us, and you're welcome to share more like about this abusive environment at home after your
yes.
parents taught you that amazing
Yes.
story that I believe in. And I have been taught the
Yes.
same story. And I thought the song you were going to mention was I Lived in Heaven a long time ago. It is true,
Yeah.
etc. But is another song is I'm a Child of God. That is amazing, the one that you
Yes.
said. But those principles, right? Those that
Yeah.
doctrine or those philosophies stay in our heart and in our mind is what gives us hope when we
Yeah.
are, even from the ones that taught us, but then the ones that are making us miserable at the moment for X, Y reason. In your case, your parents taught you the song, and then, or I don't know if it was just more the children's organization at church that taught you that song and that story. But how who was your divine aid, and then when was the moment that you think you probably turned into your own hero?
My divine aid was my brother Michael.
Wonderful.
He taught me the gospel.
Your brother, who is your brother? Is he could he
My,
watch, or is he watching, or
no, he's working right now.
So,
He'll
so
watch it. He'll watch it.
So can you tell us a little bit, just a little bit glance for our audience of what you went through?
Sure, sure, sure. Well, like I said, that's difficult to do without talking about my parents.
Right.
And so what you need to understand about, and so I'm the sixth of nine children. My mother became pregnant with me while she was mourning the death of her mother, who had died from lung cancer. My grandfather's a tobacco farmer in East Tennessee. So my mother was raised on a tobacco farm, and they both smoked cigarettes because that's what everyone did. And my grandmother got cancer and died, and my mother blamed my grandfather and was very angry. And then, uh, so that's I'm not going to go further into that genealogy. It's hazy from there. What's more important is my father. Um, my father was abandoned by his parents, and so because of that, I've never met three of my grandparents. And so my father, and so that because of that relationship with, or that rift in my father's family, and I've sort of been separated and sort of cut off from both. My father went to Vietnam and got PTSD from, and Vietnam was insomniac. He had a very difficult time supporting the family because he had a very difficult time working. And so when I was born at that time, my mother couldn't care for me because she fell into postpartum depression. My mother was bipolar and was an addict, a drug addict. And so my younger brother, when my younger brother Isaac was born, I was only like 17 months old. And so my oldest sister was essentially my mom at that point. And I had, five older siblings, and so they sort of chipped in and took care of me, but I never really had my mom. And so that circumstance was when, me being born essentially is the beginning of my hero's journey. And so to answer your question, Lori, about the Joseph Campbell thing and the hero question specifically, the basic, and so Joseph, for those who are listening who haven't, don't know who Joseph Campbell is and what we're talking about when we talk about the hero's journey. He wrote a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and what it does is he takes a broad range of all of the oldest stories about heroes, and he identifies a pattern, and that pattern can be mapped onto the story. And the moment I learned what the hero's journey was, I knew it immediately for what it was, which is the plan of salvation. So the basic pattern of the hero's journey is that the hero has to leave his world and go to another world, a place he's never been, a place that's scary, where there's dark and there's risk. And then he has to conquer fear, and he has to win a prize, and he has to die, or at least either symbolically or literally, and then he comes back to life, is resurrected, or renewed somehow, and then he returns back to the place he started originally. That's the journey. That's the plan of salvation. And so as I understood the plan of, what the hero's journey was when I first heard it, that was us in heaven, according to the story I was told when I was a child, and we all chose to come to Earth. So by simply showing up on planet Earth, each of us is on a journey, the journey of the hero, in which we must conquer fear, in which we must die, and followed by a return. The heroes also usually have some sort of quest or some sort of thing that they're supposed to do. That's the tricky part, because
Yes,
when we
it is.
show up, to planet Earth, we're helpless babies. We don't know anything. So if we were alive before we were born, we forget. We forget. And so part of the most, where the hero is lost at the beginning of his journey before he wakes up to what he's supposed to do, he's sort of just in the prelude to that quest and that story. That specific part of the story, the main story, has not yet begun. But the cool thing is that it begins when it begins, and every person has that choice.
So Olivia Smith is saying interesting. Olivia, tell us more. What is interesting? And then Matt Plank, not sure if anybody knows Matt Plank. He says, I am evil incarnate. And I ask him, what does that mean? So I also mentioned Natalia Nutting. She likes to train people on how to be better storytellers, and she loves to tell stories. So
And
that
welcome,
is,
Nadia. There's a lot of people watching right now, and I just want to
yes,
say welcome. Thanks for those questions.
absolutely. And
Yeah, well,
comments.
the best storytellers get paid a lot of money in our culture. We reward the best storytellers for sure.
Story writers, yeah. So hello, Sue. Hello, Olivia, and all watching. So what else can you tell us, Noah? Your brother was your divine aid.
Yes, my brother was my divine aid. And so I was mentioning earlier about this quest. I learned I had a vague intuition about what my quest was because of my brother, because my brother would talk to me about the story of the plan of salvation. And he would talk about God way different than anybody else I'd ever heard talk about God. Because in the Mormon church, we believe God's a man, he's a person. And so we would refer to this to God as a person who does things, specifically create the world. And so we were intensely curious about how God did that. And we would have conversations. We would ask each other hypothetical questions and do thought experience. And we played in this realm of ideas all of the time since I was a child. And so, and I never got bored with it. And so whenever I was learning something about the world that I could map onto my understanding of this plan of salvation, the story, and what God is actually doing with us here, I would be filled with enthusiasm. I would get energized and I would get so excited, and I would search that thing out and learn everything I could about it. And so over time, what this has done, this is like giving me a very nuanced, detailed, and weird, but very coherent, consistent understanding of what this story is and why we're here and what we're meant to do while we're here. And so that well of energy, that enthusiasm, some people call it their passion, the thing that they're passionate about, that energizes them. Once I started to notice that it was pointing me in all of these directions that seemed very disparate and unrelated, but over time they all became related because I would constantly zoom out to understand it in the broader story, in this great big story. And so now I have almost an obsessive compulsion to zoom out and provide more context for anything that I'm saying or explaining to people. And so talking about the hero's journey and Joseph Campbell and these broad patterns that you can identify in literature and in religious traditions. And so I became obsessed with studying other world religions and other cosmologies and theologies to see if what my understanding of this giant plan, this giant framework, and if I could map it onto there, then I could learn, maybe I could identify a pattern, I could learn something. And I could draw closer to God by expanding my knowledge. And so my eventually it began to occur to me that this would be a really cool, I would try to explain my ideas to people, but I would just confuse and upset almost everyone, right? Because I would just start talking and I would get lost in my head on all of these ideas and I would think that I was making sense. But it was just me being, I was called many things. Let's just say that. But I
Well,
know
but
everybody.
then you were trying to make sense in your head
Yes,
for yourself
it made
first. And
perfect sense to me.
when we talk it out and we
Yeah.
explain it, we want to
Yes.
teach what we're learning and what we're excited about and passionate about. And that's
Right.
probably what you were doing. But even when people were not getting you.
Yeah.
Well, talking is how we get, to help with mental health or different things.
Right.
Talking things out,
Mhm.
it's how we make calm,
Yes.
better decisions even. Or if we're went through something horrible, if you talk
Mhm.
about it, especially to trust somebody you trust, but even if you
Right.
just
Right.
talk to a tree, it helps us because it's getting it out there, or like Lori likes to do is
Yes.
putting it in a journal, right?
Right.
So
Well, I mean, to me, the way that I approached this was always I'm like a pattern recognition guy, and so I would look for patterns, but I would be looking for really weird, nuanced patterns based on my specific understanding of what God was, and so when I'm trying to talk these things out with people, I'm trying to point out patterns that are obvious to me, but nobody else can see without a weird conversation that they don't want to be in. Okay. So, like, that's what crazy is. You know that, right?
I remember watching a movie
Crazy is
kind of
when you
like
can see
that.
something that nobody else can see. And when you see something that's there, that's obvious to you and no one else can see it, that's what makes you crazy, right?
Right.
So like I have to like, and so over time, I learned this the hard way over time. And so eventually it sort of dawned on me over time that this needed to be a book. I just wasn't quite sure what kind of book. And then it wasn't until a couple of years, about 2 years ago, when I realized what kind of book it needed to be, which is a memoir. And so my book is a memoir couched in religious sci-fi. It's me telling my story, but I'm telling that story from the point of view in the pre-existence before the earth was made. And it's me in that pre-existence making the choice to come to earth and taking on the challenges of life willingly, and putting my life up to this point, at least up into the publishing of the book, into the context of this broader story. And so the ending of my book will be me writing my memoir, real up to real time, and it will be the narrative of me submitting the manuscript for my book and handing it to the publisher to publish.
Yeah.
So that it will be, so that book will be literally my story, as much of my story as I can tell.
Yeah. Um, and then I don't know if you've answered, when did you become a hero, whether to yourself or for somebody else, after
Oh.
you got your amazing brother's divine aid?
So the question is, let me see if I understand your question. When did I become a hero, in the sense that when did I become aware that I was a hero?
Yeah, that, because according to John Campbell's hero's journey, and if we think of Gandalf, if we think of Luke Skywalker, they have the
Yes.
divine aid, and then for
Yes.
them to polish them, for them to teach them, for them to discover the power they've had within,
Yes.
and with all this tumultuous childhood and whatever
Yeah.
that was, you were clinging onto this story because it gave you so much hope. You were trying to
Yes.
make sense of it, and you wanted to know
Yeah.
your part and your place in it.
Yes.
When do Luke Skywalker, when did you become Luke Skywalker, and then you swing that sword and discovered, and then, or use the force, so to speak, and
Mm.
I can do this, and I can be light, and I can be a divine aid for others? Because to me, part of the plan, according to what we both have learned in our faith, is that we need to live with that intention in life and purpose, to find ourselves, discover ourselves, find that self-esteem, worth, so that we can be light and shine and the salt of the earth, and do the same and be that to others, right? And then go back to where we came from, is in the presence of God through Jesus Christ, right? But then, when was that time when you discovered, I can do this and be myself, my own hero? Tammy always says, don't be a victim,
I do. I
and
do
you
see that
decided to step
because they
away
were
from
actually
that.
talking about that the other day. How many people play the victim card anymore in everything?
And
But
we
what I
have
like,
all been
Noah,
victims, right? One way
Right.
or another, we
is
have all been
we
victims.
all, yeah, exactly. Like we are the victims. But Noah, I love how you went and you researched to find out, okay, what led my parents to do this?
Yes.
Why
Yeah.
did they become this way? Where
Yeah.
was this? And it's like, how,
Yeah.
if we go and we look, and parents are not perfect, but what you went through was horrible. But at the same time, if we can take what we learned and turn it around, so like with your girls, I'm sure you are not the same. You are their hero.
And then also break that
Yeah.
pattern, break that
Breaking the patterns.
generational, breaking the
Yeah.
generational courses, is
That's
what some
right.
people say, right? and
Yes.
and start new beginning.
Yeah. So this generational trauma is necessary. So the path. So discussing the path of the hero has to know himself, and that's generally how the story starts. Is the hero doesn't know himself, or or if he does, then that's usually the prelude or something at the very beginning. Um, and understanding, the Bible talks about this. The Bible says that the sins of the fathers will be passed down to the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. And so we have the things that happen to our parents cascade to us, down to us. So for example, okay, I said my this is a perfect example of this. My father was he was the youngest child, but he was a junior. He was named after his father. So my father's name is Harold Wayne Seaborn Jr. After the his father went to the Korean War and came home, and when and he told me this not just a few months before he died. This is something that he always struggled with. But when his father came home from the war, um, things happened, and my father caught my grandmother having an affair and told his dad about it, and his dad went into a depression, got angry at him, and responded by kicking him out to live with his grandmother. And so even though he was named after him, he was named Harold Wayne Seaborn Jr. after his father, he was kicked out of his own house and lived with his grandmother until he went to Vietnam. And so understanding what that effect had upon him was super important, because when we are separate, that separation trauma from our mothers, so the relationships and the neural pathways we develop in the relationships with our parents are repurposed later in life to our romantic relationships. And so because that rift between him and his mother, when he was traumatized by that separation, was caused by a strange man, a stranger to the marriage, who cuckolded his dad. And so this is how it played out in my father's life. My mother was married to another man when she met my father. So do you see, he had to be the strange man to reunite with his mother. And so he was deeply in love with her his whole life. But unfortunately, these patterns repeat. And she ended up having an affair on him later on in life, and he forgave her, stayed with her. So this cascading generational trauma, it goes until someone stops it. And so you can think of a hero that does that, but that's not technically how I think of it. But understanding that and coming to know oneself is super important. And so this kind of generational trauma is addressed specifically in the Mormon church and Mormon temple rites, where we're washed and sealed from the blood and sins of our generation. I think that's what that means. And so the way that I broke the cycle, however, was not that. I think that was a necessary precondition. But what changed me and what set me on the hero's path was when I chose to start telling the truth.
Awesome. Telling the truth, integrity.
Yes. Well, I mean, the truth will set you free.
Yes.
When you start telling the truth, it doesn't feel like it. And I have to credit Jordan Peterson on this, because I started listening to him right when he rose to popularity years ago, and one of the things that he said, there's a couple different lectures that he gave, but one was specifically to people in the mental health profession. And he was talking about how the job of the therapist is to pursue truth with his patient. And that pursuing truth and speaking truth specifically is redemptive in and of itself. It doesn't really matter what you say, as long as it's the truth. Mm-hmm. So that was compelling to me. And I started to notice that when I was telling the truth, that I felt stronger. Like I felt stronger physically, I felt stronger spiritually whenever I knew that I was telling the truth. And so however, and this was the tricky part. And because I had to reconcile being truthful with having to work as an attorney in the business world. And so the problem is like, when we have to, in the way we communicate with people, is that we, you know, there's a balance, there's a fine balance between being 100% authentically genuine, which is super important for your, you know, genuine and being genuine and authentic is super important for your close loved ones, but it's not for a person you're trying to do a business deal with. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
absolutely. I have some comments here that I really would like to share. Vanessa,
Yes.
welcome, and I'm so happy you're here. She says it's so hard to break the generational trauma. It often
Yes.
comes with physical illness, and I agree. It also
Yeah.
comes with mental and spiritual illness. So, Melissa, hello, hello, Melissa. She says that trauma is passed through our DNA. That's how our relatives affect us.
Right.
Oh, that's a question. Is that how our relatives affect us? I would say yes, but then I'm gonna let you answer,
Yes.
Noah, what
I
your
think
point of
so.
view. But then
Yeah.
Vanessa is saying, Melissa, The Body Keeps the Score. I really like that book
Yes.
too. It's a
Yes.
great book that discusses how generational trauma can be passed down to
Mhm.
subsequent generations.
Yes.
And then Melissa replies, My mom was a traditional figure in her family. She hugged and said, I love you. She did not grow up in a demonstrative family, but she made sure her children knew we were loved. And anyways, what are your thoughts? I really love that book,
This
The Body
is
Keeps the
super
Score.
important stuff. In my personal view, well, first off, Bessel van der Kolk, super smart guy. Go watch his podcast on Diary of a CEO. It's really good. Um, he's the author of that book. Really good, really smart dude. But yes, the generational trauma, that's a real thing. And that is something that, like I said earlier, it's literally described in the Bible. That we have these things that we get from our parents that cause us to suffer. And the remedy to that is the atonement of Jesus Christ. Here's what I mean by that. The doctrine of Christ specifically is to address suffering. And this is the way I understand the gospel. It's the doctrine of Christ to me is very simple. It's all about dealing with suffering and how to account for the suffering that we endure in our life. Okay, so let's just and when we think broad, everything is sort of like a form of suffering, right? But I'm talking about like the existential suffering that we endure. There's this suffering comes from there's like I put them into there are three buckets. There's the suffering that we endure because of other people's choices. For example, our parents, or a bully, or our siblings, or what doesn't really matter, a mean person at work, right? Other people can cause us to suffer. And the doctrine of Christ is that we forgive them. Okay. And so as far as that kind of suffering, that's what forgiveness is meant to do, it's not to address wrongs, it's not to correct people, it's to prevent us from that suffering in as much as possible, unless it's not like physical suffering, but still. Then there's the suffering that comes from our own mistakes. So we make bad choices in life, and we're dumb, and we're emotional, and like I said, we make mistakes which cause ourself. So our own behavior will cause our own suffering often. So when you lie and it messes up your life, you suffer. So that kind of suffering is addressed by repentance, which to me is simply telling the truth. It's 99% telling the truth. I'm convinced of that. And then you have the third form of suffering. That third form of suffering is the suffering that is due to God's will. And that suffering will always be the best kind of suffering to endure, because it will transform you and it will conduct you to the promised land, and it will give you what you want ultimately in the end. And so what makes Christ the divine hero is that he endured and forgave all of the people that caused him suffering. He never endured suffering from his own mistakes. And all of the other suffering was God's will that he go through to transform him and to make him perfect in the atonement, because that's what his quest was. And so that is the pattern for every human, is that we embrace the suffering that God wants for us so that it transforms us and conducts us into the promised land. This is the path of the hero. This is what the hero must do. He must tell the truth. And the point of doing that is so that he knows where to go. Because if you lie, you get lost. And if you lie, you're blind. And so you tell the truth to know where you're going, and even, well, to be led in the right direction. So what faith is to me is simply the proposition that if I tell the truth, then whatever chain of downstream consequences from that, no matter what they are, is the best possible version of my future. Because I'm doing my responsibility by telling the truth, and I'm trusting God to make that the way to the promised land. That to me is what faith is.
So it's interesting because we're all brought up so different, right?
Yeah.
I was brought, to always tell the truth, no matter what the circumstances are. My grandparents engraved that in me all the time. And my grandmother, even though they had a ranch, she wrote for the papers, and she's like, "You've got to tell the truth, always, Tammy, as a reporter," and she'd go and which is sad is they don't do it anymore. But she was all about integrity and the truth. And it kind of reminds me when you were talking about the movie Liar, Liar, wasn't it? It was kind of funny because when he had to start telling the truth, the circumstance, the consequences he dealt with, there's too many people, they'll tell half a truth. You know what I mean? And then the rest is a lie. And people, what's sad is a lot of times don't catch that, so it's like you always have to pray for discernment. So you realize who is telling the truth always,
Yes.
It doesn't mean we can't do it in a gentle form, so you're not hurting people. You're being kind.
Yeah. Telling the truth doesn't mean sharing your unkind opinions.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you have nothing good to
Or your
say or
vulgar
nice to say, yeah, don't say anything at all. So Noah, I really appreciate you sharing all this. It's definitely very deep and insightful. I love how our audience have commented. Please make sure to go back and then make personal comments. They will appreciate it. As this guest speaker, you've spoken a lot of truths, and like Kiki said, our guest that we adore, she said that she writes it out to sort it out. I pray it out, talk it out, and write it out to sort it out. Excellent. And when we do that, we're telling the truth again and again and again, and hopefully it's honest, it's authentic, and then we're gonna understand things better. And the sorted out part is like, okay, these are my needs, this is what I'm looking at, this is my story, these are my needs and my wants and my deepest desires, and or this is what I want to change or need to change or do something different about it. And it's very important.
Well, Jordan Peterson also says that this is one of his rules. He's got a lot of rules, but one of the best ones is to look at yourself and consider yourself as a thought experiment. Pretend that you are under your own care, like you're a loved one that you're supposed to be responsible. You should treat yourself the way you would treat a loved one that you're responsible for. And this, to me, this is how what I see repentance as. I see that the doctrine of repentance is really just sort of taking a brutally honest inventory of what's actually happening in your life, and then telling yourself the truth about it. So, I'm addicted here. I let people abuse me. When I talk to people, sometimes I massage the words I use to make myself a little smarter than I am, a little bit more successful than I am. That I know cool people, and that I've been to cool places, and that I've read cool books. And so maybe I won't say them out loud because that would be a lie, but maybe I'll just sort of hint with the way that I speak. Right. And so when we sort of use our words and we make them less truthful in order to get things, or to prevent, either to get things that we want or to prevent things that we don't want, right? This is where it's tricky to be a lawyer. And this is why that movie is so funny, because it's the lawyer's job to get things that he wants with his words and to avoid things that he doesn't want with his words. And the smarter the baby, the younger they are when they learn how to do that. And so by looking at our lives and just all the little nooks and crannies and just start telling the brutally honest truth to yourself, it's painful, it hurts, and it requires courage to do, and it requires toughness to do. But that's really what the word repentance means. Penitare means to punish, and you're doing it again because you're hurting yourself when you're doing these things. But by repenting, you're looking at it and admitting them and feeling that pain again. And by doing that and identifying it, that's 99% of fixing it. Yeah. Is by looking at it and naming it for what it is, instead of blindly not looking at it in order to avoid the pain of admitting those things that you do in your life. And so to me,
and avoiding to own up to our mistakes, yes, and what part we play on and that right. Equation, right?
And so the path of the hero is to tell the truth. And you'll know you're doing it right when your life turns to chaos because of the truth. And that's what happened to me. And that's what led to my midlife crisis and divorce, because I started telling the truth, and then everything started to change. And it was like, it started to change so fast, it was almost out of my control.
Why is that, Noah? Why is it that when you finally accept, though that's insightful scan, right? Or body scan, mental scan, decision-making scan, if that self-evaluation, self-assessment, why yes. is it that things get crazy and chaotic? But to me, this is my answer, you can give me your perspective, is like when you go to a hotel or a grocery store and they're reconstructing and making improvements, they say, pardon our progress. It's going to get messy sometimes before it gets better for long term. That renovation, right? That reconstruction, if you find the word that I'm looking for, I would appreciate it. Remodel. We're remodeling. Pardon our progress. It's because you realize, okay, there's malfunctions here in the pipes, in the foundation of this structure, whatever it is, and we have to improve it. And it can get very messy. That's what I tell my clients when they start with me. Let me tell you, this is gonna get messy, bumpy, and it's gonna be okay because it's gonna look beautiful long term.
Well, look at every hero story. None of them are interesting if things stay the same and nothing changes. I mean, what's the point of that? I mean,
it will be boring.
The whole point of the journey is to change you. The reward is there at the end, but the reason you don't have it is because you need to change first. That's part of it. And so that's part of what that death is. It's either an actual death or a symbolic death. Our sins have to die or we do. Somebody's got to die. That's the formula of the hero.
Absolutely. And then we're reborn.
And you have to do it. It's got to be in a scary place. So tell the truth, be courageous, conquer your fear.
Why is it so then divorce, etc.? You mentioned that when it got messy, but then you also mentioned in the context of you becoming your best version and so to speak, the hero. So why is it that some decisions like that in the case of divorce is a better choice for again, here we go with long term, because probably your relationship wasn't what you wanted. And then maybe you were lying to yourself or had the blinders. And then when you remove the blinders and did this mental assessment, you realize this is not going the way it's supposed to.
Right. Well, I was lying. I lied to myself for too long about my childhood, my trauma, and all of that stuff because it was too painful to look at. And so I avoided it. And so there were all of these deep patterns that I was unaware of that were having adverse effects on me, and by extension, I was suffering, and my ex-wife and my children suffered because of it needlessly, because I was blind to the problem.
Right. So since it was getting, sadly, there's times flying today, but how did you get into the martial is that what kind of led you into the martial arts to get some stress out, or how did you get there?
It was a parenting decision. And so my oldest child, Eden, is hyper intelligent and um, but is also high anxiety. And as a child, she was so intelligent that she was used to knowing every single answer to every question she was asked, and she's just like would sort of amaze her teachers and stuff like that. But to the point where if she didn't know the answer to any question, even no matter how innocuous it was, she would feel shame and fear.
Oh, yeah.
And so my ex-wife and I decided to, as a parenting decision, we came to the conclusion, oh, well, everything's sort of easy for her because she's really gifted and smart. So we're going to have her do something that that we know she's not going to be good at. And it's going to take a long time to get good at. Martial arts was the perfect solution. Plus, exercise, confidence, all of these things, it's important. It was important for me to, to teach my children. So all my children know how to strangle other humans to death because
That's
I made sure,
awesome.
right? That was a thing that, but so it was a good thing for them, but it was also something that, so I decided to join with it and do it with her too. So we started together. And I've been doing it for 10 years since then because it's really fun and it was helpful and I've made good friends. And she did it for several years and then decided she wanted to try Muay Thai and kickboxing and do other things. So, but she did say that she did she did let her mother know that she was thinking about starting it again. So that makes me happy.
That's awesome. And I think people don't really, that if you're not in martial arts, what I
Yeah.
loved when my grandson was taking Taekwondo is how it teaches respect, which you don't see that often
Well,
anymore.
it makes them tough. It makes them tough.
It makes them tough, but the respect for their parents, the respect for others, how they open door. I mean, it's just such respect there.
Yeah,
The
and for young
manners.
men, it's super important. For young women, it's really cool to like. So my ex-wife trained too. She's a purple belt, and I've
Awesome.
watched that woman strangle adult men that were bigger and stronger than her, and squish them against the floor and made them beg for mercy because of this martial art that she learned, this skill and this confidence. I can't tell you how many times I've seen women come into these, and because I've helped train them. I was a beginners class instructor for a long time, and I would see women come in that were sort of just had this body language and they were just so quiet and they were so shy and reserved and then after 6 months they're walking around like this because they're fighting every couple 2 or 3 times a week. They're fighting and pushing themselves and doing something. They're willingly engaging in something that's difficult, right? So that is what changes people. That's what transforms people, is the willing endurance of willingly endure that suffering. Because it kind of sucks to get beat up by people and your friends, but if you're doing it together and you're playing a game, it's fun. But it's not easy, and it can be really tough. But that pursuit of that goal and being willing to endure the suffering on the way there, that is the path of the hero.
Yeah.
That's literally what Christ did. He suffered doing the will of his Father, right? He suffered because that's what he decided to do. Now, if I decide, oh, be I'm going to be a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's going to take like 15 years. It doesn't matter. I'm going to start going. I'm going to keep going until I get there. I'm going to suffer along the way. That's the path of the hero. I'm going to write a book no matter what. I'm going to start a business no matter what. I'm going to set my goal. And then even if it takes me to suffer this amount of suffering to get there, I'm willing to endure it. That's the path of the hero.
I really appreciate that. What you just said, Noah, is how many times people, and you see it in videos, oh, and Lori and I always laugh. It only takes 5 minutes to create this video. And I'm like, Lord, I'm like, it takes like how
Yeah,
many,
yeah,
you
yeah,
have to go and take a video if you're not using copy of somebody else's. And then you have
yeah,
to come back, you have to download it. It takes way longer than 5 minutes.
yes,
And
yes,
and there's mistakes that are made along the way.
yeah.
Or like on Journey, nothing is perfect. You're going to have your good times and your bad times, but you just have
Mhm.
to get yourself back up,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
But
Another way to teach this to your children is so when they say they want things, say, oh, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer. I make it a point to describe the suffering required to get it. Because that's really what determines what you want, is what are you willing to suffer for? If you're not willing to suffer for anything, it means you don't want anything.
Right. No, you don't want
You
it
know,
bad
your
enough.
only other option is to act like a victim and hope somebody gives you what you want because they feel sorry for you and you can't help yourself.
And that's what you see is a lot of people trying to be the victim, so they get everything for free. They don't
Yeah,
want to have to
because they're
actually
not
go
willing to
through.
suffer for what they want.
Yeah.
So guys, you got it. The takeaways: be your own hero.
So, but
After you get divine aid. So
This is what makes the Christian God unique. Is he's the God that willingly endures suffering.
yeah.
yes.
And we
So,
need to
and
do the
what I
same.
find so interesting, Noah, is Lori knows Noah from choir. And I just wanted to throw out this, Noah, what made you join the choir? This is his little secret.
It's a
It
secret
goes from
revealed.
going from doing his martial
Martial arts.
to.
So it's called the Millennial
Oh,
Choirs and Orchestras by the founders, siblings, Brett and Brandon Stewart, and he belongs to the one in Dallas, Texas. And we see each
yes.
other during rehearsals all the time because I'm a parent volunteer.
Yes. Why did I decide to pursue music or the millennial choir? Well, I've always loved music as a child. I've always found I've always been very affected by music. Um, and I would self-soothe with it a lot. And so I always love to sing, and I always love to, when I have a hard time expressing emotions, music would help with that. And it's also how I bonded with my children. And so the bedtime routine at night was I would tuck in my each daughter, and they got to pick one of the hymns, and I would sing one of the hymns to them, and then that would be their bedtime routine. And
I did the
so
same thing. So.
yes, I always loved to do that, and people would ask me, my ex-wife always asked me to go sing in the choir. She always compliment my singing, but I didn't like to sing in front of people. I would have anxiety. Even though I could get up and talk, I could get up and talk for like an hour about the scriptures, you know. But getting up and singing, that was very different. I didn't like doing it because I had too much anxiety and I just didn't like being in front of people. And then in 2020, I believe, this is yeah, I need to double check on that date, but I need to go look through my journals, but I had a vision. I had a psychedelic experience with psilocybin and had a vision of heaven. And the vision basically what you can't really describe what's happening, but the takeaway was that heaven is made out of music. It's the best way I could put words to it. And so I had this my relationship to music changed at that point. And I stopped being afraid of singing in front of people, and so I joined my church choir in the ward. And then the choir director was like, "Hey, you should audition for MCO. They need men." And so I did. I started singing in MCO and have not stopped. So that was about 6 years ago.
So awesome. So I love it. It's the different arts that you've talked about, writing, you've talked
Yeah.
about the martial arts. These
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but to
Go for
answer,
it.
because I didn't answer your question. The not fully at least. The singing harmony heals me. There's no other better way to say it. So singing in a choir where we have 120, 130 people that are taking singing seriously, and we're singing 6 and 8 part harmonies and performing with an orchestra on a stage, and we're singing about this sublime music about Jesus that healed me. That helped me deal with the bodily stress and trauma that that was during that time. All of that, all of the stress and stuff from the COVID and lockdowns and all that stuff, but also that was when the tension in the marriage was was at a very, very high level. And so it was sort of like an anchor for me, and especially my testimony. And religion in the church was a contributor to the tension in the marriage. And so it sort of became my church.
Mhm. Your safe haven or refuge.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know. There's something about music that does it. I turn on the
It
different
heals it.
songs in the morning at Christian stations. I just love listening to like Phil Wickman or Brandon Lake or King and Country. Just listening to their words and the song. It like you said, it's healing. It's
Yeah.
relaxing. To me, it's a great way to start your day. Whether it's especially this time of year, I don't want to open the doors because it is so cold outside here, and it's only like 40 degrees. You don't want to open the doors and hear the birds sing, but when you can hear that
Yeah.
music.
Well, the highest form of art is the one that you can participate in. And so listening to the music was great, and rehearsing it by myself, but there is nothing in the world like standing in a professional choir and in a concert hall, especially if there's an organ. If the organ, it adds another whole another level, because your whole body vibrates with the music. And I've had intense psychedelic flashbacks to that psychedelic experience, being on stage and performing with a choir, singing about God, and literally feeling the music go through my body. It is a religious experience.
It is. And me being part of the audience, me being a walkie-talkie stage person on the days of the concert, and me being back there is just seeing the production and seeing the kids. For Tammy, correct me, Noah, it's children from 3 to adults to 100.
I don't.
3 or
Yeah,
4.
I don't remember how young they go, but I've seen there's like really little kids that are
And
super
then
cute. I
I
think I
used
think it's more like 4. I don't think
4.
they have.
So I support the concert choirmen, which is young men from like 14 to 18, and just seeing them there, they're
Yeah,
cool and all that. And then this might
yeah.
be geeky, but they look
Well,
amazing.
there's 2 of my daughters there. Have you met my
Mhm.
daughters? Yeah,
I
that's it.
haven't. I'm looking forward to meet them. And then you're saying praises to God, etc. But there's a whole semester, and then this that took us or took them to the Boston Symphony Hall. It was all about patriotism
Oh
and about
yeah,
this nation. So
yeah.
I mean, it's worshiping and it's uplifting. It's faith based and
Mhm.
it's interfaith, and it's a community wonderful thing to do. I put the link to the Millennial Choirs in this chat, and
It's peak
once
Western culture, is what it is.
yes, and
It is.
in this Christmas, you're gonna sing a soul song, worshiping Jesus and Christmas. A soul version of
Solo.
it. Once, no, not a
Oh,
soul. Are you
it's
singing
just
a solo, Noah? But it's a
No,
oh, it's just a
soul.
soul.
It's
Oh,
a
yeah.
soul song, and then also a song in
oh,
Spanish from Spain. I
As in the
mean,
music style,
the
the
music
genre,
style. Yeah, the
the genre
genre.
oh,
soul.
oh, okay.
So thank you so much for coming back. This again, we surpassed our time allocated for this, but the conversation was so amazing that we're very grateful and happy. And thank you for being here, Noah.
Well, thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah. Thank you
You
so
guys are
much.
very kind to me. Thank you.
Well, and I'll have to have you back on another time to discuss something else. I mean, you have
I'd love to.
so much to offer, and we appreciate it. And if you haven't, I mean, there's a lot of choirs out there. There's a lot of music groups coming around. And I've met a lot of the professional artists because I used to work with the singers and stuff. So it's cool. They're so humble, is what
Yeah,
I'll say.
it's a different. It's like
It's
it's its own
different,
little subculture.
you
And
know.
when you get to know it, it's like it generally attracts really good people.
Yes, it does. So, and we appreciate you here. If you have any questions, make sure you put them here, and we'll each try to get back to you. Last week, my phone was busted, and so it took a week for it to get fixed before I could even reply. So
I get
I
stressed thinking about
apologize.
that. Oh,
It's our livelihood sometimes.
It
You guys
is.
take care.
Take care and
thank
have
you.
a great week. We'll see you next
You too,
week.
guys.
Bye.
Take care.